Using ordinary feed molasses as a rust dissolving liquid dip, does it work? Yes. All of these parts a few weeks ago were in an absolute state. They're all off of my Radial drill project. This is just a small selection, and if you've been following along you will know what these look like. This is one of the racks that is used to traverse the drilling head up and down the arm. That has come out so well. It's even pulled out the rust from the pitting and inside the teeth. These chunky gears, cone, back gears, bevels, all come out really nicely. This is probably my favourite. This is the shaft that drives the worm and wheel set that raises and lowers the column. So the way that's pulled all the rust out of there is really impressive. Now you should all recognise this guy. This is the pinion that again raises and lowers the arm. This was quite possibly one of the rustiest things I've ever seen in my life. Just look at how nicely that has come up. So I don't think whether it works or not is really up for debate. So what this video is going to be about is how does it work, why I decided to use it, how long does it take, how bad does it smell, and will I use it again? All of these parts have been thoroughly degreased and washed. Any paint, grease or other muck will stop this process working so well. I'm stacking the parts in the bottom of the barrel in a bit of a haphazard nature to try and avoid as much part to part and part to barrel contact as possible. In an ideal world, the parts would be suspended in space completely surrounded by the solution. But because that's impractical, we are going for the jumbled pickup sticks method. The container has to be plastic, otherwise the mixture will attack it, so you can't use that rusty old oil barrel or your aluminium beer keg. Apparently the mixture will eat non-ferrous too. I haven't tested that personally. I certainly won't be risking any bronze bearings, that's for sure. Once everything is in, it's time to dump in the molasses. I bought this 25-litre tub from my local farm store and I'm throwing in the whole lot. The capacity of the blue barrel is about 220 litres and it won't be full, so we will end up with a mix somewhere around 1 part molasses and 7 parts water. I agitated the mixture as best I could, but the molasses actually dissolved into the water easier than I thought it might. So fast forward now, and the parts have been soaking for 2 weeks and it is definitely time for a clean. I was aiming to remove, scrub and wash and return everything to the mixture once a week, but I got busy with other things and kind of forgot about it, so here we are. The mixture had developed a lot of surface gunge, which needed to be scraped off the top before removing the parts for inspection. All of the parts received a rinse with water and a clean with a wire brush. The reaction leaves a black residue on the surface of the parts, and once this forms it actually creates a barrier stopping the mixture from working on rust that may be lying deeper on the part. It's essential that this residue is mechanically removed so the mixture can attack fresh rust underneath it. On this first wash, the areas where the rust was light had come up great, but there were still spots of deep rust and rust staining that needed another soak. So it was good to see that the mixture was working properly, although it definitely required a bit more time. Some parts, namely some of the shafts, which weren't that exposed on the machine, came out really well after the first soak, so I didn't bother returning them to the bath. One thing to note is that the black residue formed by the molasses seemed to be harder to remove than the same residue from some of the commercially available rust removers that I have previously used. I'm not sure why, but it is something I definitely noticed and added quite a bit of time to the process. It could just be that these are extra heavily rusted components, but I'm not too sure. I took this video a day after replacing the parts back in the bath. It's amazing how quick it starts to work and how you can almost see the rust dissolving, creating a shadow of the parts below on the surface of the mixture. Now fast forward again another 2 weeks and the parts have had a full month in the molasses mix. It's time once again to pull out the parts and give them a thorough rinse and clean. I find that a combination of an angle grinder with a cut brush and a die grinder with a mini wire wheel work wonders for this kind of cleaning. The grinder is perfect for covering large areas quickly, while the die grinder is ideal for reaching the troughs of gear teeth and other small spaces. My process is rinse, wire wheel, followed by a further rinse, dry off with a rag and a good spray of WD-40. The WD-40 is perfect for driving out excess moisture and providing a film of oil to prevent flash rust. All rust dissolving processes leave iron so clean that it will flash rust immediately on contact with oxygen, so this oiling step is vital. You can submerge freshly cleaned parts in clean water to isolate them from oxygen in the air, and there are also additives available to add to said bath which prevents the flash rusting. This is only really handy if you plan to paint parts after derusting and so don't want them covered in oil. Once I've built up an amount of clean parts, I'll then coat them all in machine oil, which will protect them enough on the shelf until we get round to reassembling them back on the machine. For gear teeth like this pinion, which has sides and so very difficult to clean with a circular wheel, I like to take an ordinary mini brush, literally grind it into a point, and it becomes a really handy pointy spinny thing that can reach into all the nooks and crannies. The molasses and water solution works to dissolve rust because of a thing called chelation. The molasses contains a wide variety of naturally occurring amino acids, some of which are chelating agents. When in contact with the iron oxide, which of course is rust, these chelating agents, by some magic of chemistry which I don't really understand, surround and bind onto the iron ions, that's weird to say, in the rust, and thus separate them from the base metal, allowing them to be easily washed away by the water in the mixture. Molasses is made from sugar beet, and it's presumably these amino acids that allow the plant to absorb iron and other metallic minerals from the soil when it is growing. And perhaps they help the cattle who are fed the molasses absorb the same minerals. Anyway, I'm not a sugar beet plant, nor am I a cow. I'm an old iron enthusiast who can take advantage of this natural process to make some 19th century cast iron parts shiny again. Now the biggest and probably the most interesting part is lurking at the bottom of the barrel, the cone. This is the main driving pulley for the drill. We removed it back in part 2 along with its shaft and back gears. It's known as a cone pulley because of its shape, caused by its 4 steps descending in diameter. There is meant to be another cone identical to this, which when mounted on a countershaft in the ceiling in line with the cone on the machine but flipped the other way around, a single belt may be moved about the 4 steps. When the countershaft is driven from a line shaft or another form of motive power, we can gain 4 distinct speeds using the steps by shifting the belt between them. This other cone is obviously missing, and making it again from scratch is going to be one hell of a challenge on this project. Luckily, it doesn't need to be as complex as this cone. The features such as the pinion on the small end for the back gears and also the belt flanges are all unnecessary for a countershaft cone. It's just the widths and the diameters of the steps which need to be identical. This is one hell of a casting. Of course, it's mostly hollow, so there must have been some interesting cores involved in the mould box. I mean, look at the 3 support struts inside, just to give the whole thing strength, in line with the 3 notches that allow the cone to be engaged and disengaged from the driving bull wheel. More on that when we reassemble it in a future episode. Plus the pinion on the end, which is all part of the same casting, and the teeth aren't machine cut. None of the gear teeth on this machine are. They are all cast in. I'd have loved to have been in the foundry that day to see exactly how they moulded up some of these parts. All that's left now is to scrape the bottom of the barrel for the last smallest parts. All the random nuts, bolts, which I hope I can remember where they go, and the strangely shaped bearing piece which came off the very top of the spindle. So would I do it again? Yes, but only in very specific circumstances. It definitely has its place, but I don't think it has many places. Oh, it's obviously extremely cheap, so I mixed up that blue barrel for less than 35 quid. Evaporust or any of the other commercially available liquid dips just can't even come close to that cost-wise. The other big advantage is that it is obviously completely organic. It's just sugar. It's safe to deal with and very easy to dispose of. That's pretty much it for upsides, to be honest, because it's extraordinarily slow. I mean, it takes weeks, unless you've got it in a heated environment or you put in an immersion heater or something like that. But then some of the cost savings go out the window. I've done it in the British springtime, which has been unusually warm, so it's been between 15 and 25 degrees over the last few weeks. I specifically waited until this time of year in order to do it. There's no point doing it when it's below 10. It smells. It smells horrendous. It was all right for a few days, but once it got going, it got going. So if you have to do it in your main workshop where you're functioning most of the time, then I wouldn't do it. If I had to do it in here, then I wouldn't do it, because on hot days when that got going, it was difficult to exist anywhere near it. Luckily, I have a lock-up next door, which is kind of a storage area, so I was able to do it in there. But even so, I am backwards and forwards. It was a little bit unpleasant to be around. Maybe adding a lid would probably help. I don't know whether that would inhibit the infectiveness or not, removing the oxygen supply, whether it likes to have a constant supply of oxygen to keep the reaction together. I don't know, I'm not a chemist. Maybe someone can tell me that. But for large, chunky parts where you have a lot to do and they take up a lot of space, it's a really good way of mixing up a lot of solution very cheaply and put it in a corner and forget about it for a month or so, even or longer. Then it's the perfect solution. Obviously there's other things like electrolysis and other organic-based methods like citric acid and blah, 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 and various concoctions of that and other things. I've not tried any of those, but I just settled on molasses because I've heard about it online and I thought I'd give it a crack. I'm very pleased with the results. It was a bit of a faff, but got there in the end and really excited to be moving along, putting the rest of the drill together. I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.